Happy Mailbag Wednesday here on the Locked On Syracuse podcast. You guys all submitted some questions to us, and we've got answers for you. We're going to address some basketball stuff, a couple of football things as well on today's show. So let's get to it. The Mailbag edition of the Locked On Syracuse podcast.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome in. This is the Locked On Syracuse podcast. We thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen every single day. We're on Twitter at @LO_Syracuse. That's where you guys got your mailbag questions in. We'll address all of those in just a little bit. We're free and available on all platforms. That includes YouTube. Rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Even if you're subscribed on Apple, Spotify, hit us up on YouTube. We love interacting with you guys there. We even have a couple YouTube questions that we will get to as well on today's mailbag. Today's episode is brought to you by NetSuite, the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. Head to netsuite.com/LockedOnNCAA for special end-of-year financing on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. All right, Tim. So I love always opening up the mailbag, especially now that we've got some space to breathe here because of the lack of games right now. Who knows? Maybe some of that changes in the next couple of days. But let's begin. We got some great questions on our Twitter account, on our YouTube account, all that fun stuff. Let's start with this one. This one comes from @ScottSky5. He asks, and this is kind of a fleshed out question, might take us a little bit longer to get through it, but what's one thing each starter will need to improve on from now until the end of the season for the team to reach its full potential? So the starting five for basketball, what's one thing each player needs to improve on? Let's just go down the list. We'll start at point guard and just kind of go 1 through 5 here.
Okay.
Joe Girard, what do you want to see Girard improve on the most?
Well, it sounds stupid, but just being a point guard, I would say, would be the one thing for him. I mean, I think he's had a decent season, but when we talked about what we wanted to see from him in our preseason podcast, and we did kind of our burning question, 10 question series, a lot of it was around, I hope that he is up there for the lead in the ACC in assists, and I hope he gets much better, much smarter at, his floor game and holding on to the ball and valuable possessions, better shots. And he hasn't really done that. He's just shooting better than he was last year. So I don't think he's improved when you look at his assist to turnover ratio enough in the point guard aspects than I'd like to see. And that would be really valuable if he sort of in his third year now. There's been a lot of talk of, well, it wasn't his natural position when he came in. Maybe second half of this season, he can start getting his assist up a little higher, which this team needs.
Yeah, right now, mine's pretty much the same answer. I'm going to change up the wording a little bit, but just the turnovers right now. I mean, a 24% turnover rate, and that, of course, plays into playing the point guard position a little bit better. So, yeah, I'm with you. It basically is the same argument that we're making there. But, yeah, I mean, he's shot the lights out. You can't complain about his shooting. He's shooting 50% from three, and he's shot the ball 64 times, has the second most attempts on the team from distance. So you can't really complain about those numbers because he is shooting the lights out. You can't complain about that. And I guess it kind of goes hand in hand with the turnover stuff, but just less empty calorie performances, if that makes sense. Like we'll see games where Girard goes off for 17, 20 points, has a really good performance, but in a Syracuse loss. Those need to cut back and start turning into wins. And I think taking care of the ball is a big part of that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his turnover rate historically on KenPom, and it's sort of odd because as a freshman, it was a 15.6 rate. And I know these numbers might sound foreign to some people, but 15.6 is decent. Then sophomore year, it goes to 19.9. That's a little bit concerning. And then you mentioned this year, 24.0. So that gradual rise, usually it goes the other direction. You gain more experience. That's been frustrating to see. Now, he's probably taken on a little bit more workload and volume as time has passed too, but still, that number should not be going up like that. And I think there's reason to believe the water will kind of find its level and he'll turn it over less because they have played some tight defenses in the non-conference slate.
Yeah, and it's not like his assist number is awful either. Like he's averaging 4.5 right now, which is good for college basketball. But the problem is you see the turnovers. It's 3.1 turnovers per game right now. That's a number that certainly needs to be cut down to about 2.2, something like that. if you want to feel really comfortable about that. All right, next up, Buddy Beiheim. What do you want to see Buddy improve on?
I would say impacting the game in other ways when your shot's not falling, and then finding a way to get to the free throw line a little bit more. Those are two things that when you're a quote unquote star, you sort of develop and add to your game. And we know Buddy can score. We know even though he's been a little bit off shooting wise, he can shoot. And he's going to figure out the shot. I think that's going to rise. The obvious thing would be probably just to say he needs to improve his shot. But when you see it at 30% right now, I'm not all that worried. They've only played 10 games. We know he's a better shooter than that. I want to see him, when he's having those off shooting nights, still find ways to impact the game, because there were a couple games this year where we said to ourselves, well, if Buddy just was hot, then maybe they would have won that game. Maybe if he's going to have these off games in ACC competition. Teams are throwing all they've got at him because they understand he's that guy this year, and he's got to find other ways to impact the game.
Right. The lazy answer here is improve on his three-point shooting, right? Like, he's shooting 27% from three right now. That's Water's going to find his level. He started last year slow and ended up shooting, almost 40% from three when it was all said and done. So he's going to get on his streak. I think that number probably sits closer to 37% or so when it's all said and done, which inevitably I think will lead to some more Syracuse wins. But I'm with you. I think defensively is my big thing with Buddy. The defense needs to improve. And I think the same thing can be said about Girard as well. Like, the defense just needs to improve at the top of the zone and just finding other ways. Like, there are games where Buddy Beiheim has 6 or 7 assists. Sometimes it's not your night, but finding other ways to get guys involved, it's certainly an important facet of what is going to make him a successful player this season. All right, let's move on to the next one. Let's go to Jimmy Boeheim here. What would you like to see out of Jimmy Boeheim to improve?
I do think he's been pretty good offensively, so I would say his defense is really what needs to improve. And you talk about how Buddy needs to improve his defense. I do think Buddy's not a good defender. I'm not saying that, but I was starting to think, okay, why is this year's 2-3 zone so much worse than even the last year, when they weren't really that great defensively, but they were still putting up much better numbers and teams weren't shooting the three ball quite as good. And pretty much the one thing that is drastically different is the forward and the front line group that Jim Boeheim keeps bringing up, how our front line is totally new. And he's talked about how the forwards are getting beat on the baseline more than they ever have before. I think it's been a little underlooked how Jimmy and Cole are struggling on defense, because a lot of the attention, and I guess this is just how it's always been, goes to Girard and Boeheim struggling on defense. And that's why we're giving up the threes at the top. But I think that's a little unfair at times. The two new guys to this zone and the non-constants from last year are maybe what is really dragging this down a little bit when you look at it from sort of a bird's eye view.
I'm going to go with, I kind of have two for Jimmy right now. One is rebounding. I think defensively, he needs to be a much bigger role of the defensive rebounding. And that can be a bunch of different people too that can kind of feed into that. But right now, averaging south of 4 defensive rebounds per game, that's a number that needs to improve if the Syracuse team is going to get better. And the other thing is facilitating. We kind of thought he would come in this year as that Marek Dolezaj guy who kind of could move the ball, get things going for you, set up a lot of nice things. He's averaging 1 assist per game, which is a number that's way lower than I thought it would be this year.
Yeah, that's a good point there. For the other two guys, quickly on those, Cole, I would say just develop kind of a 1 or 2 dribble pull-up. I think that could really help him. We've seen flashes of it, but he's not getting his three-point shot in terms of coming around screens, and teams are guarding him tight there. So find a way to kind of get to your shot that way maybe. And then for Jesse, this is kind of obvious, but just aggressiveness on the rebounding and defensive glass in particular. I know sometimes he's being dragged out to the corner, but the rebound numbers have to go up for me.
Yeah, for Jesse, mine's pretty easy for him. Stay out of foul trouble. Like, this team needs him.
Which he's done a better job of.
Yeah. And be physical. Be more fit, which kind of sounds counterintuitive and hypocritical. Like, be physical, stay out of foul trouble. But it's something that he needs to learn, how to control his physicality and kind of impose himself. Because right now he's not doing that as much as you'd like on the defensive end. And then for Cole, I think it's just continue to be aggressive and get to the free throw line. He's one of Syracuse's best free throw shooters, but he's got a very low free throw rate right now. He's a guy who, we talk about Buddy, like finding other ways to impact the game. I think that's been Cole's strength this year, is finding other ways to impact the game with assists, with rebounds from time to time. But yeah, right now he knows the shot's struggling. He's shooting less than 30% from three. We thought he'd shoot probably in the neighborhood of 36, 37%. Maybe people even had loftier expectations for him than that. But I think getting to the free throw line and just staying aggressive, even though the shot isn't always working for him. All right, we'll get to more of your questions in just a little bit. But first, bowl season is here. And we've been telling you about PrizePicks. And if you still haven't signed up, what are you waiting for? In addition to college football action, PrizePicks makes college basketball that much more exciting as well. It's daily fantasy made easy. PrizePicks is the leader in college sports daily fantasy, and they offer more college football and basketball props than anybody in the world, including all the star players of the Power Five, as well as mid-major players that you might have never even heard of. They've got more props than you can think of. In basketball, you can play points, rebounds, assists, three-pointers made, and even more. And all users that deposit and use our promo code LOCKEDON, that's locked on, all one word, will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. Again, just got to be sure to use that promo code locked on, all one word. Pick 2 to 5 players with an over-under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry. It's just you versus the projected numbers. So use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. It only takes 60 seconds or less to make these picks. It's that easy. PrizePicks is safe and offers fast withdrawals, so don't hesitate. Check out PrizePicks.com, use promo code locked on, or go to your App Store and download the app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy.
All right, this is it. The putt to win the tournament. If you sink it, the championship is yours. But on your backswing, your hat falls over your eyes. Is this how you want to be running your business? Poor visibility because you're still relying on spreadsheets and outdated finance software. To see the full picture, you need to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth with visibility and control of your financials, inventory, HR, planning, budgeting, and more. NetSuite is everything you need to grow, all in one place. Over 28,000 businesses already use NetSuite, and for the new year, NetSuite has a new financing program for those ready to upgrade at netsuite.com/locked. Head to netsuite.com/locked for this special one-of-a-kind financing offer on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. That's netsuite.com/locked.
All right, we thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen every single day. And be sure to check out the Ultimate College Football Playoff Preview 2021, local experts, betting advice, and draft analysis. The most comprehensive college football playoff preview begins this Friday. They've got a great one for you on the Locked On Podcast Network. This one, our next question that we'll get to, is coming from YouTube. This is from Tony Moresby. He's got a question about Frank Anselem. He says, I think a potentially interesting look with this year's team would be to see how Anselem looks on the wing of the zone. He could cover the back line with Cole, Jimmy, Jesse in the middle, Frank on the other wing. Coming out of high school, I think he was more of a forward than a center. He would add athleticism to the zone to cover corners, help Jesse on the boards. You would have to take a shooter off the floor to make this work, but do you need another shooter out there or an athletic rebounder that will dunk everything? What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I've always thought that going back to the preseason, there was some talk of this, especially when we hadn't added Cole Swider, or maybe it wasn't, we hadn't added Jimmy yet, because we were trying to figure out who are the 4 forwards. How does Beiheim get to his classic number of 4 forwards? And there was some talk of maybe you count Frank as a forward. Look, the forwards I just laid out, I think that's one of the big issues defensively of the zone. The corner 3 is wide open. There's not enough athleticism in that front line. So, well, it might be a little bit odd to incorporate Frank, and he comes with some limitations at that position. I think it's worth trying at least. Now, I don't think Boeheim's going to do it because he's been pretty adamant against it so far, and it seems like if he would have done it, he would have done it already.
I'm not opposed to it. I just think it clogs a lot of things up offensively. Like, I can't even picture what the set even looks like offensively when you're going down there on the floor, because Jesse and Frank essentially need to stand in the same spot to be effective, and there's only one spot, and you got 2 guys. So while defensively, you're right, it makes sense, and maybe it's something that you'll see, like, oh, there's 3 seconds left in the game, a team needs Syracuse needs a defensive stop. Maybe you see it then. But in terms of running with it for 3-4 minutes at a time, I just can't see it working out effectively on both ends of the floor that way. But if you need one possession stop, I'm all for it.
Right. I think if you went to it, you would have to have Joe out there and probably not Symir. And that's one thing that's bothered me a little bit is how Beiheim, when he's using the bench, is using them all together pretty frequently. And we've seen a lot of times it's Frank, Benny, and Symir in the same lineup. And while that's been some of our better defensive stretches, it's kind of like, why wouldn't we balance the scales a little bit so we get more offense and we're sort of blending strengths and weaknesses more?
No, I'm with you on that. Again, it's kind of a funky look, but if you need one stop, I'm not opposed to that at all. Here's one from our guy Tony Staffier, who tweets at us all the time. He says, "Buddy on the bench who takes the shot with under 10 seconds left on the clock in regulation, down by 1 point coming out of the timeout." Now, this obviously would have to be Buddy is injured or Buddy has fouled out of the game. I don't think there's ever going to be a situation where you see Buddy on the bench and 10 seconds or less left on the clock. Who's your guy? Because I have actually an interesting answer here.
Yeah, I think the obvious answer is Joe Girard, and I hesitate to say that a little bit because we've seen late game stretches. I believe it was Indiana this year where he sort of settled for a 30-footer, and then we've also seen him make those bigger shots. So I think in terms of the rest of the starting lineup and the options you have to pick from, he's got the most sort of gravitas in that moment and the most willingness to take it, most fearlessness, and sometimes that's a good thing from a guy. He's also probably made the most clutch shots, at least at Syracuse. Jimmy, I think, would probably be next, and then I'd go Cole after that if I was drawing up a play.
So here's who I have, because I think there's an important caveat here. Down by 1 point coming out of a timeout. I'm giving it to Jesse. I don't mind that one bit because he's had the success around the rim. And again, it's a totally different conversation if we're talking about it's a 3-point game or let's say you want to go for the win. Obviously, the answer is not Jesse. If that were the case, I think it's a pretty easy Joe Girard call. But down 1 point, coming out of a timeout, you can draw something up, get a little pick and roll. I kind of like Jesse as an option there, down 1.
Yeah, and maybe the answer is putting Joe and Jesse in the pick and roll then, because you can't give it to Jesse and clear it out, obviously. He doesn't really have the post moves. And that's not how the offense works. Yeah.
Here's one from @Caslake Fisher. That's Dave. He asks us pretty bluntly here, do either of you think we are making the tournament? Is Syracuse going to make the tournament? Gun to your head, Tim Leonard. What do you say?
I say no still. We talked about this a little bit. I did check Bart Torvik for their latest projection on the T-Rankatology, and they're giving Syracuse still a very little chance, 2.4% chance right now. The reality is the ACC is probably a 4-bid league at the moment.
Yeah.
And that is even including Wake Forest as maybe one of those teams, which I'm not saying Wake is total like smoke and mirrors right now, but if I had to pick, I don't think they'd make the tournament just because they're kind of a younger team and looking at their roster, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. I do think that the ACC is going to be scraping at the barrel to get to 5 or 6. And a lot of my logic as to why Syracuse doesn't dig out of it this time is just I don't see enough quality wins on the table in the ACC this year for them.
Here's one reason for optimism. I'm with you. I probably lean no right now, but Syracuse has this good pause early. Jim Boeheim went on a radio show, said 14 of 20 have gotten COVID this year. And that includes managers. So for those wondering, like, 20 players, like there's no roster of 20 players. No, that includes managers, that includes walk-ons, that includes the scholarship players. So it all adds up to 20. You're going to be able to play games. Some programs are not going to be able to play games for stretches. And I think your ability to maybe pick up wins late in the season might be something that is to your advantage. Again, this is going to be a really weird tournament field, I have a feeling, just because of all the stuff that we're seeing going around, the pauses. And again, it looks like, if I had to guess, this forfeit rule is going to get lifted at a certain point. But even if the forfeit rule stays in place, where if you play a conference game and one team has to bow out because of COVID-19, it's an automatic forfeit. Even if that is still in place, none of that goes against your tournament resume. That is strictly being used for conference tournament seeding, but it will not be held against you by the NCAA tournament committee. But I think that with Syracuse having this kind of, I'm not going to say in the rear view because there's still 6 players or someone in capacity that haven't been affected by it. But to have this level of sort of herd immunity moving forward, they're going to be able to play a lot of games, you'd imagine, down the stretch. And that may be a luxury that other teams aren't going to have.
Right. Yeah, they're 122 in the net right now, which will level itself out somewhat, but I can't stress enough that that is literally the NCAA tournament evaluation tool, and that is a very not good rating at the moment.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break and then we'll get to one more. I've got a football one and a basketball one. One more basketball one that is very interesting. Who's the best Syracuse player of all time? And I think this is a very interesting debate. Okay. There's a number of different ways that you can go with this one. But first, BetOnline has you covered through this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as playoff football continues its march through the college bowls and then, of course, the pro football playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season, so head on over to their website or use your phone to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. All you got to do is use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive that bonus. Basketball, football, NHL, boxing, UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. They've got futures bets that you want to get in on. Do it right now. BetOnline.ag. They're the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. So don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available. BetOnline, where the game starts.
This holiday season, you got to grab a Built Bar, guys. They are the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. They're even better than a candy bar because they are filled with holiday goodness, rich with flavor, covered in chocolate, and amazingly low in calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat, and they're high in protein. So you get the best of both worlds. They're delicious and healthy. So many great flavors to choose from. You'll have a hard time choosing yourself. Well, you have raspberry or mint brownie, cherry or double chocolate, cookies and cream, or peanut butter brownie. And maybe tell Santa to throw a few Built Bars in the stockings this year. You can even dip your Built Bars into a piping hot cup of cocoa. Let it melt a little. Give your beverage a bit of that Built Bar flavor. There's so many different options on their website, Built.com. They've got the Built Bar Puffs, which are some of my personal favorites. Light, fluffy, marshmallowy through and through. Different flavors, all covered in chocolate. They taste so good, you won't believe that they are filled with protein. So go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com.
Let's move into this question, and it comes to us from Dylan E. on Twitter. He asks, who is Syracuse's best player for basketball all time? I always say Melo. My dad says Coleman, and I guess that makes sense. Old guard, new guard, kind of going at it. That's your Jordan LeBron, I guess, of Syracuse basketball. If you had to ask me, I say Melo because winning is everything, right? Yeah. And he has something on his ring finger that Derek Coleman does not. And to me, that means a lot. But let me throw out an interesting name that I feel like does not get enough credit in this debate. Jerry McNamara. Like, he kind of has the best of it all. He's got the ring. He was fantastic in that NCAA tournament final game. He has kind of all those moments that you need, the Big East title run, the 43 versus BYU in the NCAA tournament. One of the clutchest program players of all time, made the tourney all 4 seasons, 3-time all Big East, all NCAA tourney on the Natty run. He's the all-time 3-point leader, 19th in NCAA history in 3-pointers made, 4th in the program in scoring, 3rd in steals, and 3rd in assists. Like, how does he not get enough love for this best player in program history debate? He's one of the best players on a national championship team, your only national championship team in history.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to come out here and say he is the best and he's above Derek Coleman, even Dave Bing, I think, just looking at his numbers. You know, there's Pearl Washington, I think. He only played 3 years, but Pearl was really dominant in terms of, like, his last season, I believe, was 17-8, somewhere in that neighborhood. I guess if you play the reason why Melo is the all-time guy is because they won the national title and he was the guy that brought it home. And I totally agree with that. I think if I had to pick one, it's Melo still because he has that trump card of winning the national title. Plus,
and he did it in 1 year.
Like, his individual season, just untouchable.
Is one of the best, if not the best, freshman season of all time.
Yeah, I think it is the best. And
well, when you cap
bias there, but
a national title, like, it's very hard to argue against it.
You know what's interesting too is he came out of the gate and he scored 27 or more points in his first 3 games. Like, I get they were probably playing lousy competition, but that just shows you he was at another gear. And Mike Hopkins has talked about how when he first saw him, it was like, oh my God, like this is unlike any player I've ever seen before. He goes 22 and 10, like 10 rebounds, that is. That's plus he had the sustained NBA career, scoring 778 points in one season. Tyler Roberson, I'm looking at the list right now. His entire 4-year career, he had 779. That's not to pick on Tyler Roberson,
right?
Who only averaged like 7 a game, but I mean, that shows you that Melo did that much scoring. He's inside the top 100 of Syracuse all-time scorers, and the guy played 1 year. That's insane.
Right. Yeah, and he won a national championship to boot.
Right.
Like, it's very, very tough for me to go against Melo. And I get that Derek Coleman, fantastic career, number 1 overall pick. Like, he was amazing too, right? We're splitting hairs here, but to me, it comes down to the championship. Like, he has that one elusive thing that, like, if Jim Boeheim doesn't have that, he's all of a sudden Mark Few. The way we look at Mark Few right now, it's that guy, but it doesn't mean a thing without the ring. And right now, Melo delivered that one big thing for Jim Boeheim and is a big part of his legacy.
Right. I do find it fascinating how the names we're bringing up are kind of like overlapped a little bit. G-Mac and Melo on the same team. Then you just look at the all-time scoring list. Lawrence Moden leads the way. Derek Coleman second. I guess their careers didn't ever overlap, but it almost feels like they did. I guess John Wallace, number 3, overlaps with Moden. So to have 2 2,000-point scorers in that time period is pretty wild. And Hakeem Warwick overlapped with GMAC. He's 5th all time in scoring. So there was some really good errors for Syracuse basketball for sure.
One other little GMAC note too, to kind of cement the point as well, is they did not go to the NCAA tournament the year before he got there. And they didn't go to the NCAA tournament the 2 years after, for 2 years straight after he left. It shows the impact that he had. And again, maybe he didn't have the best of talent around him towards the end of his career as some of these other guys may have had on the team during their tenures. But yeah, I just don't think GMAC gets enough love in that conversation. Like, it feels like we never even think of his name when it comes to when you're talking about the absolute greatest. Like, if you're doing your Mount Rushmore of Syracuse, he may get a little bit of play that way, but you never talk about him as the best of all time. And I really think he deserves a little bit more credit in that regard.
I do agree with you that he probably had more quote unquote moments than anyone else. Maybe the clutchest Syracuse player ever. And watching back his YouTube highlights is still one of the best things ever. Like, he's one of the more enjoyable rewatches of all these guys just because of his whole arc there and staying for 4 years, all that.
Right. All right, let's close out on a football one. This comes from Kyle. He asks us, unlike a lot of SU fans, I still believe in Garrett Shrader as our QB. In your opinion, what would constitute a successful season for him next year if he remains the starter?
Just leading this team to a bowl game any way possible, I would say. But if you want to get more particular on Garrett Shrader as a quarterback, maybe just don't have teams selling out so much and daring him to throw to the degree that they were at the end of this past season to allow Sean Tucker to do his thing a little bit more, just establish a little bit more balance in the offense, which who knows if they get these Virginia guys as of us recording, but that could go a long way in helping that.
Yeah, to me, it comes down to you got to be a passer. Like, you have to have the threat of throwing the football. I'm not saying you got to go out there and throw for 4,000 yards, but you have to be capable of leading a comeback drive with your arm when needed. Because, I mean, right now, you're effectively a wildcat quarterback, right? Like, you know what's going to happen. He's handing off or he's keeping it himself. And right now, you're not having a lot of inspiration with Garrett Shrader as your quarterback right now. You need to throw the ball at this level. You just need to be able to throw the ball. And right now, he does not have that as a part of his game.
Yeah, and he's going to get the opportunity because Sean Tucker is still going to be the focal point of the offense next year. We've seen it to a degree, like the Virginia Tech game I keep going back to, but that was an example of him showcasing his arm for at least a decent stretch of the game there. Yeah, so it's in there somewhere. It just needs to be developed. He needs to work on his mechanics. And Dino's talked about how maybe during the offseason they can get it right.
Yeah, listen, if he was able to effectively throw the ball this past season, probably an 8-win team.
Yeah.
At least 7, but probably an 8.
I agree.
Like, That's the difference, and you end up being a 5-win team and miss out on a bowl game yet again. All right, that's going to do it for us on today's show. Tomorrow, a little more football news for you as well. Jawan Price, the New Mexico State running back, is transferring to Syracuse. He was the leading rusher for New Mexico State, so we'll break him down, what that means to the Syracuse backfield, and we'll also get into some more hoop stuff. Who knows? There may be some breaking news as well. Will Syracuse add a game? Will they hire an offensive coordinator for football? We'll dive into all that stuff and more as we get you closer and closer to the holiday weekend. So for Tim, I'm Tyler. We'll talk to you